Well, hello and welcome to another Practical Show Tech webinar. We're excited to be back together again. And joining me as usual is Pete and Mac. And welcome, guys, back to another time. And we're joined today with a couple of friends from Sound Devices, Cody and Gary. Both folks that you've probably seen before on Practical Show Tech around RF coordination and IAS and all the other things that make RF actually work outside of hardware. So we're pretty excited today to talk about another topic that is really passionate to our audience, which is everything wireless. I think to say that the wireless environment around us is at the greatest level of change ever would probably be an understatement, even in making that. We're all experiencing just the next and the next and the next normal. There is no normal. It's just the next normal, right? And about the time you think you've got it all figured out, somebody comes up with a new thing. But today is about new things, new and old. The Astral Wireless systems that we see from Sound Devices, which probably our most recent product to join the marketplace, and that it's a pretty mature product, but is questioning a lot of things that and workflows and ideas that I think in today's market is probably necessary and certainly is something that is an opportunity that is out there for everybody. But before we start getting into the how, the why, the what, the wheres, let's start with Mac and Pete. It's good to see you guys again. And before we get too far in, Pete, you got any thoughts about? Well, I know you do. Why don't you share some of your thoughts with us on wireless and whether it's specific to Sound Devices or what you see in general?
I'm always amazed at the innovation that's coming out of the engineering community to deal with the fact that we have less and less and less and less spectrum available, and we need more capability to fit all the wireless stuff in when the rest of the world doesn't want it at all. At least they think they don't want it. So this is one of the products that is absolutely amazing to me.
Yeah, and Mac, I mean, wireless demand all-time high, right? It feels
Yeah,
like
yeah,
everybody wants to be on a wireless, whether it's an
exactly.
intercom, microphone.
You could be sitting in a seat with a mic in front of you all night, but it has to be wireless. It's
Yeah, this is a sea change that I think is probably permanent. The mobility, I think some of that may be driven by, we've become quite accustomed to having our cell phones wherever we go, to having just mobility in general, and mics are no different, right? That the mobility, and I do think that the desire for wireless also is indirectly providing, they're saying, hey, we have a confidence in this technology,
yeah,
right? We trust that wireless is going to work. This isn't 30 years ago. Well, unfortunately for Cody and Gary and all the other manufacturers out there, that just raises the bar a little more, right?
yeah,
Because that trust level is at an all-time high. But, you know, there's always a but, isn't there?
yeah, yeah. It's
So, yeah.
yeah, some of us are old enough not to have that trust level completely yet, but we remember back to the days when it was different, and you hoped the wireless worked, not you expected the wireless to work.
Right. We are in a new era in that way
Yeah,
where
Yeah.
and those are the kind of things. So before we move on, let's talk just for Q&A for a second, because this platform, Mac, we obviously can
it's
take.
it's about Q&A. So It's important that attendees ask questions. You can type them into the little Q&A icon down at the bottom of your screen. Should open up a window to allow you to type in questions. Understanding that they may not be answered at that second. There's a presentation going on that we're not going to interrupt, but they will be answered in a timely manner, and we will take moments during the presentation to solely address the questions. But the questions are really what drives the conversation. So we have a couple of guys here who really know what they're talking about, and let's not let them off the hook. Let's formulate some good questions. And I'm looking at the list of attendees, and I see there are some people there fully capable of asking some good questions. So I think that's really all I have to say about Q&A. But it's thank you, Andy Levis.
No, but these are one of the things we do pride ourselves in, is that when the manufacturers come on, you're hearing from the people that have direct impact on the product, right? That understand, they don't just understand the product, but when you bring ideas, they're going to, affect that change. They're there to advocate for our industry. So to Mac's point, bring on the questions, but we'll get to them at the right moment. Yeah. Meanwhile, I think it's time to turn it over to Cody and Gary, and to kind of walk us through not just the product. One of the things I will just put out there, Cody and Gary, I appreciate about you guys, is they understand Practical Show Tech's not about just coming on and showing a product. It's not just about, hey, here's the latest thing we built and come and buy it. It's about helping our viewers understand how to use it, how to put it into their workflow, hopefully discover some things they never even knew existed about a product, and then the troubleshooting, all those kind of things. We're about the unvarnished truth, and good, bad, or indifferent. So at this point, I think we'll turn it over to Cody and Gary to take it from here.
Sweet.
All right.
Man, thanks for having us. Yeah, this is pretty awesome. We definitely appreciate being on here, and I know firsthand that this webinar series has been great for myself and so many others for the amount of time that you guys have been out too. It's kind of funny. I've done a few of these demos, and we've talked to people and referenced them to specific episodes of Practical Show Tech, and they're kind of mind blown when it's like, oh, that was way back in, a couple of years ago, and it's been kind of fun to see the webinar series progress and just how much knowledge has come out of it, though. So thank you guys again for kind of keeping this platform going, because it's been a pretty incredible one. So
thank you.
All right, let's go ahead and dive into this. So yeah, as the guys mentioned, we're gonna do a little bit of PowerPoint here at the beginning, just giving a brief overview of our system. I'll introduce myself, Gary will introduce himself, Gary will talk a little bit about Sound Devices. We'll cover receivers and transmitters, just so everyone has a good overview of what we're looking at as far as the entire platform goes. And then we're going to kind of do a full interactive scope from top to bottom on the entire system. We're going to pair transmitters. We're going to look for spectrum. We're going to go through setting up, transmitter parameters. We're going to have a lot of fun. And as people want to try to figure things out, or if you've used the system or haven't used the system and have, just any sort of curiosity as to how to do something within it, please let us know. That's why we want to try to be here and help everyone out. So without further ado, we will pop over to our PowerPoint here. So my name's Cody Heimann. I've been in RF and doing events with a lot of folks in this room and outwards for about 15 years now. I've had a lot of fun in the freelance space, and I've been with Sound Devices for a couple of years now. kind of my past experience has been primarily in larger one-off style events. So I was the head coordinator at New Year's Eve Times Square for a while. I got to work as the main stage RF technician at Coachella, work with the wonderful Jason Glass at the CMT Music Awards, and amongst so many other things. And it's been really fun not having kind of one specific medium, which is what's been really cool about going into Sound Devices now and developing the wireless system here with our incredible team, as you'll hear from Gary as well, just a kind of a big difference in knowledge sets, which has been super fun in developing these products. So I'll hand it over to Gary now and let him take it from there.
Yeah, thanks. So I'm Gary Trenda. I'm also an applications engineer at Sound Devices. And yeah, like Cody mentioned, like we're both kind of field guys. We've started as RF techs doing lots of different special events kind of work. If you want to keep going on the slide, Cody. So I've done, a few events here and there. Like Kelly mentioned at the beginning, we're going to give you a little bit of an overview about the Sound Devices Wireless, about the company, and then the wireless products we've got, in case you've never seen any of the Sound Devices Wireless products before. But then, yeah, we want to leave plenty of time for Q&A and also a lot of hands-on, like how do you configure the system and answer the questions about that as well. Okay, so what do you want to know about Sound Devices? We've got I'm in Madison, Wisconsin right now. We've got a manufacturing facility that's in Reedsburg, Wisconsin that I go to sometimes. And we've got an office in the UK, which really came about because Sound Devices acquired a company called Audio Limited, which was making wireless microphones. I mean, now Audio Limited's been making wireless mics for over 40 years. So that's where some of our RF engineering staff comes from. And then we've added on to that with folks in the US. So it's really a fun collaborative effort between those teams. And we're part of the Audiotonics group at this point. So we're going to have a little pop quiz here about the different group logos, but they're in alphabetical order if it helps you. There's lots of companies that you've heard of in the Audiotonics group, like Digico, Allen and Heath, Calrec, SSL. Recently, we announced Jerry Harvey Audio joining the team. We've got some others here too. So it's been fun to collaborate with some of these folks because there's a lot of great shared engineering resources amongst these various companies. And so today we're really just going to run you through what is Astral Wireless, what are the products in the Astral Wireless family, and what are some of the main things that you want to know about Astral Wireless. And starting with one of the big things we highlight is something we call spectra band, which is just our term for it's a very wide tuning range. All of the receivers are capable of tuning from 169 megahertz down in VHF up to 1525. And all of the transmitters can do at least 470 to 1525. And then the body pack can also do that VHF range. So there's some interesting things that gives you the ability to do. And then obviously audio quality is a thing that Sound Devices is known for, starting making mic preamps and mixers, then mixer recorders. Audio quality has always been a big deal. So how do we translate that into the wireless world? Something that we call gain forward, but it's a mix of different things. Partially a very wide dynamic range on the audio input. You're capturing 140 dB of dynamic range at these transmitters. And then very wide frequency response. We've got 10 to 20 kilohertz frequency response. And then for some of the recording functions, it's a 32-bit float recording, so you can make sure that you maintain that wide dynamic range, even with some vastly changing audio signal levels. Also, NextLink is something that we'll be talking about more in detail, but we've got a remote control data link that goes between the transmitters and receivers. And so it's a proprietary system that we've developed. It's bidirectional control. It works at really very long range, and it's very robust in even a noisy RF environment. Astralcom is something we've been talking a little bit more recently, where it's how are we talking to third-party systems from our receivers. And particularly right now, we're rolling out control of Digico consoles back and forth, being able to fire macros from the microphone or having a macro from the console. We'll be able to, in the next firmware update, we've announced that the console macros will be able to then affect the receivers. So that'll be fun. And then some other things, like we'll talk about different antenna modes with the systems, like fourversity, where you can connect 4 antennas per received channel, or hexversity, where you can connect 6 antennas per received channel. And that gives you some real good flexibility in terms of your wireless coverage capabilities. And so with that, I think Cody is going to kind of run us through the receiver, the family of the 3 receivers that we've got, and highlight some of the features there.
Cool. Thanks, Gary. Yeah, so we're going to start diving directly into the receiver portion of the Astral Wireless system. Kind of our first one that we really came out with, and one of our just kind of favorite things that we've done here was the first one we did was the A20 Nexus. It's a 1/2 rack space unit, and it natively supports 8 channels of wireless audio. You can expand it to 12 or 16 channels, though, in that same 1/2 rack space. You can do that by unlocking it, and you can do that via perpetual purchase or as a rental. So if you only need 8 channels for the duration of your year, but there's maybe one time or a couple times that you need it to be 12 or 16 channels, you can actually rent that and make that a 7-day 12 channel unit or a 30-day 16 channel or a 12 channel unit, whatever you'd like to do there. So it's really fun, and it's also just really supports workflows in the best way possible, I think, because you don't have to lock yourself into a set of hardware. Another really great thing, as Gary mentioned, and just getting that global tuning of 169 to 1525, or our Spectra band range, as a part of this and all of our receivers. And then looking at kind of how it's configured mechanically, we've got antenna input ports on the front of this, as well as a headphone socket, 4 beautiful OLEDs on the front that are all touch screens, which makes just navigating through the system very, very nice. And then just a standard push dial, select dial at the front of it. And your menu button, this one's super important for kind of operation of the system because it just toggles between all of your main menus. Once we move to the back of the unit here, though, we get a bit more tight and pretty complex, and it's just a lot of fun to see what you can put on the back of a unit. We have the ability to actually power the A20 Nexus via PoE Plus. So it gives you just another power supply option for your unit to, again, just kind of make sure that whatever workflow that you use is supported. We have dual DC power inputs as well as dual DC power outputs on this. The other fun thing is our audio output. So 2 DB25 D-sub connectors. You have 1 through 8 on the top and 9 through 16 on the bottom. Now, what's really fun about this, though, is if you're using this as an 8-channel unit, you can actually take 1 through 8 on the top and 1 through 8 and mirror that on the bottom and have that as a passive split. But it's also independently switchable as to what your output medium is. So maybe your top one is mic level 1 through 8 and your bottom is line level 1 through 8. Or you could have 1 through 8 mic level on the top and 9 through 16 line level on the bottom. So we really wanted that to be a nice workflow change for people. You also got time code and word clock as an input on here. The front had antenna inputs as we saw, but we also have antenna inputs on the back. The back ones can also be utilized as antenna output. So if you do want to utilize an output from this to another unit, you can come in on the front and out on the back, or you could just choose simply to use the input on the front or the back. 2.4 gig NextLink antennas on the back here. So this is what Gary talked about, is that kind of control protocol that we have for our system. We're really going to dive into that in depth as we go through the rest of this webinar. But we do have that. We also have rails that you can do a 2.4 SMA cable to the front of this and navigate those 2.4 gig antennas to the front of the unit. On the Nexus Go, which is the same form factor and the same hardware chassis that you're going to see on the Nexus, but we wanted to be able to have another receiver available to people that was a lower channel count, so we could kind of get in and be able to flex with just different channel counts and different setups. So on this one, you're going to notice is a 4-channel native unit. You can expand it to 6 or 8. As opposed to starting at the 8 and going to 12 or 16. Same thing with the licensing on this, though. You can still rent by 7 or 30 days, or just do the perpetual purchase unlock. 169 to 1525 yet again. And then the front panel differences that you're going to see here is we've got no headphone socket on the front of this. And then navigating to the back of this, we're going to be looking at no SFP on the back. So that SFP on the back of the Nexus could be a control port, a Dante port, anything that you really want to do with most of your networking protocols. We don't have that, as well as you lose the second D sub. So because this maxes out at 8 channels, you've got 1 through 8 on that bottom D sub, but still can be different output mediums. And we don't have any control ports back here. So you lose the capability to have Dante or the web GUI, and 1 DC input. And that kind of takes us through those 2 receivers. Now, as we get into kind of the flagship receiver, you're going to notice most things that we had on the Nexus and the Nexus Go will apply into the Super Nexus. So we kind of wanted everyone to have access to everything that we offer in all of our packages and just kind of scale up accordingly, not really allow you to have to lose anything. So when we're thinking about this, it's really kind of fun to think of all that stuff really as our base models, and still capable of so many different things. So moving into the Super Nexus, this is now a 1RU chassis, but it's 16 channels natively. We can then expand this to 24 or 32 channels in that same 1 rack space unit. Again, 7 or 30-day rental unlock or perpetual purchase. Still have the global tuning of 169 to 1525. We're going to get into this more in depth when we go into the actual demo of the unit. But you can operate this in 3 different tuning bands at the same time. So 3 separate 24 meg chunks of spectrum between 169 to 1525. So we'll have a lot of fun kind of looking at the different modes and the ways you can utilize that to your advantage in really dense spectral areas or areas where we need to move things around a lot from a coordinator. So that's going to be a really fun one to dive into. Front panel, you've got your headphone sockets and volume knob. Although on this one, we did give you both flavors, so no adapter needed. 8 OLED touchscreens on the front instead of the 4. Still have the selector encoder and your menu button. Moving to the back, you're going to see a lot of differences from the first 2 units. Still have a lot of the same protocols, but we do things in a little bit different way here. So when we're talking about power, instead of the dual DC or the single DC, we're now on an AC and DC power option for the unit. We have Dante outputs as well as MADI outputs. So moving into the audio transport here, there's 2 different mediums so far, but then we also give you AES and mic line outputs. So you'll notice something that kind of looks different than most receivers we've seen or most ways to transport analog and AES, which is that AES72 type 1M protocol. So that's that RJ45 connector, and we do it in a way where we fan out to 4 XLRs. So you're going to have a single RJ45 to 4 XLRs that's going to give you 4 audio channels on the analog output side, and then a single RJ45 to 4 XLRs to give you 2 channels of audio per on the AES side there. The really good thing to note about this is all 4 of these mediums, Dante, MADI, AES, and analog, all output simultaneously. So if you need multi-mediums on a given show, you now don't have to try to track down an orange box or try to go figure out a different I/O configuration. You can natively send all 4 of these protocols to wherever you need to go at any given point in time without any sort of compromise within the system. So after we've covered power and audio output, we're now going to start looking at the RF inputs and outputs. A really big benefit to the Astral system is the fact that we've got these 6 antenna inputs and 6 antenna outputs on the back of our system. So this is going to give you a ton of flexibility for, even if you have a super basic setup where you just want super robust coverage, or a very difficult multi-zone, very complex setup, this unit is natively going to support basically any workflow you can think of, because you're going to get multi-antenna modes natively out of this box. So 3 sets of diversity, or hexversity, as Gary mentioned earlier, or 4versity. We really are going to look into those when we get into the interactive portion. But it's just really worth noting and bringing home that all these are natively inside of this box for you. And then you can also output this RF that you're bringing in with those 6 RF outputs. We do have an expansion chassis box called the A20 Opto. This has a mechanical connector on the top of it. So it's a multi-pin high-speed bus. You connect this to a Astral A20 Super Nexus, and it will look like this. So now it is a 2-channel unit. And what you get out of that, and the benefit of why we decided to build this box, was we were really hearing people and talking to a lot of people about a missing output medium, and that was optocore. So with this system, you are going to get an optocore output plus another set of analog, another set of AES, another set of SR seed MADI outputs, and GPIO. The really cool thing about what we've got here is the flexibility to have kind of a passive split already built in. If I've got 1 through 32 coming out on my top Super Nexus, I can have 1 through 32 again in multiple places on this A20 Opto box, plus Optocore. So with this Optocore integration, this is going to show up in your loop as a stage rack. So you can now omit that part of the equation and come natively out of the unit. So you're actually getting a 5th output medium now, MADI, Dante, analog, AES, and Optocore, all from a 2RU box. And then just the massive benefit of having an SRC MADI source. So you can be sending 2 different clocks to whatever MADI you're taking. GPIO is really fun. We've seen a ton of creative ideas, as I'm sure everyone has with any sort of GPIO fun in the past. But we wanted to integrate that in some way too, because there's just so many things you can do with that. So it is also worth noting that the power on this box will power through to the Nexus. So as you've got 3 different power options, it just makes it a very, very powerful 2RU box. And then we also send this as ST. So you can get this in 2 different SKUs, Optocore or ST. One thing that we started talking to people a lot as well within the ecosystem is this is a lot of eggs in one basket, right? I'm saying this with big air quotes that I don't think anyone can see right now. And as we kind of had those conversations, we really, thought about that in depth and saying, okay, well, sure it is, but we want to be able to support that a little further to make people very comfortable with the ecosystem. So we decided to come out with a concept referred to as mirror mode. So mirror mode takes a super nexus and a secondary super nexus, or a nexus and a secondary nexus, and allows it to have read and write capabilities to one another in real time. So if for some reason I have a challenge via power or network on my primary unit, it will automatically start working through the secondary unit with no loss of audio. All of your data is read and written in real time down to the second one. All the transmitter information pushes over, and then that way you have no worry about what's going on. Another really cool thing Gary mentioned, and this was kind of a really fun one when we came out with the AstralCom concept when he was showing those definitions earlier, is AstralCom is the ability to fire a macro on a digico from our transmitter or receiver. Well, now in conjunction with mirror mode, you can actually set a macro on your digico to fire an alternate layer if mirror mode secondary is enabled. So your primary has a challenge, your secondary takes over, and it fires a macro automatically on your digico to enable the alternate layer for input. And you've never heard a loss of audio and you have no clue that a failover even happened. So it's a very, very robust protocol, a million options, and we are just really proud of kind of this integration with digico and where we're going with this stuff with mirror mode and just the macro commands. A couple quick, very last things before we start diving into the interactive portion. We have an A20 Monarch antenna. You get 2 of these with every receiver. So the Nexus Go, the Nexus, or the Super Nexus. And kind of the point of this was to have a really great wideband omnidirectional antenna that you could use right out of the box, because a lot of antennas that we see out there are kind of limited and not available to have the same spectral access that Spectra band does from 169 to 1525. So being able to offer an omnidirectional antenna from 470 to 1525 right out of the box, we wanted people to have access to some of that really cool parts of the spectrum with these antennas. The last piece of hardware that I just want to touch on really quick is our A20 outpost. So what this does is allow you to remote your Nextlink to a completely independent location. Now, this outpost is not required to make Nextlink work, as Gary mentioned earlier. Nextlink is native in all of our receivers, and you don't have to have any additional hardware. You don't have to buy anything upgraded. It's all a part of the system. But because we have this outpost, you'll notice on the front view of that we have an SFP on it and an Ethernet port. So you could actually take this over a fiber medium or an existing network and put this inside of a green room or out to a broadcast truck or a second venue, something of that nature. And it just makes Nextlink a much more robust protocol overall. And then the last thing I just wanted to show everyone is a very quick overview here on receivers. And this is just a very quick comparison between them. And I think at that point, Gary, did you see any questions that we need to touch on?
Yeah, I can answer a couple of questions real quick. Martin had a question about bug fix for an upcoming firmware. Unfortunately, we can't really talk about upcoming firmware releases on this webinar, but as soon as the new firmware comes out, please feel free to reach out to support about that question. And then Eric's got a question about with mirror mode, would the RF go through the cascade ports? And that, yeah, that's kind of up to you. You can absolutely connect all your antennas to the primary, let's say Super Nexus, and then cascade into a secondary Super Nexus. If you're super concerned with redundancy, you could have a separate antenna distribution, or you could even have separate antennas for your secondary unit. Depends on how how redundant is redundant, right? But you could absolutely use the cascade ports for that if you wanted to. And then John's asking how many Nextlink units can we deploy out of a single system? So that's going to be changing very soon. So stay tuned on that. Right now, each Nextlink radio, essentially, so the Nextlink that's built into your receiver or the Nextlink that's part of the A20 outpost, each one can connect up to 64 transmitters. Right now, you are switching between them. You'd either use the local one or a remote one, but we've already said that in the future we're going to support multiple outposts on a single receiver. And so you could imagine if you had a single receiver plus, let's say, 4 outposts, you wouldn't run into any concerns about connecting a large number of transmitters.
Yeah. And it is also just worth noting too, with even the local on a receiver or a singular outpost, the coverage that we can get on that is pretty amazing too. I've been just blown away at the use cases we've had and the scenarios we've been in with just one kind of in use and the coverage we've gotten there. So,
all right, so I can keep going with a bit of a quick overview of the different transmitters before we get into the fun stuff with all the live demo. So right now we've got 3 different transmitter models. So there's an A20 handheld, which is the most recently released transmitter. Where we started was with an A20 mini, something that's intended to be sort of hidden away on Talon, very small body pack transmitter, and then the A20 TX, which is sort of your standard size body pack transmitter. And as we're highlighting here, they've all got a very wide tuning range, that's spectra band tuning. So the A20 mini, as you can see, is a very small transmitter. We've got it through next to some international currency there. It's a very curved shape, so it's very easy to throw into a pouch. Like if you're doing something in theater where you want to stitch a pouch into a costume, or if you're using a lot of the available elastic pockets that go on your waist or an ankle or something like that. There's lots of good options for how to hide this in a pouch. Top panel on this thing's got a 3-pin LEMO connector, which is for us our standard lav mic connection that'll support 2 or 3 wire lavs with either a lavalier mic or a headset, SMA connector for your antenna. Depending on what frequency you're operating on, you may want to put a different length of antenna on there. The unit does ship with 3 different antennas, and one of them is a long antenna that you can cut down to a specific size. But also, you've got a USB connection on the top, which we'll talk a little bit more about later. It is water resistant. The door on it is gasketed, and all of the connections on the top are fully sealed, so water can't pass through them. So you don't want to dunk this underwater, but for a, let's say your typical environment where it's going to get water splashed on it, or just maybe your talent's sweating quite a bit, it's going to be protected against that. It's a couple of different battery options. You can put AAA batteries in there. It also takes a lithium-ion battery pack. We've sized it to fit a Sony NPBX1 battery, and we definitely recommend that people use the Sony NPBX1 with it just for the rechargeability of it. The runtime on the NPBX1 versus, let's say, these Energizer Ultimate Lithiums that are shown on the slide is going to be very similar, right around that 4-hour mark. And you can recharge that Sony battery using the USB-C connection on the top. We also offer a battery doubler door for this. So it's not a different transmitter, but you can just change out the door. The hinge pin is removable, and you can put another door on there. The larger door takes a second Sony battery, which would then double your runtime up to 8 hours. One of the other things to highlight with the A20 Mini is it does have 64 gig of internal flash memory. And so it does have recording capability. In some countries, that means simultaneous record and transmit. Either way, when you do record internally, then that's why you've got a USB-C connection on the top, because you can pull the files off of there. The recording is a 48K 32-bit float wave file. And so that's good for certain scenarios. And also, if you're in our location sound world with TV and film, you've got the ability to via NextLink sync time code to the recording as well. So after the Mini, we've got the A20TX, which is a standard size body pack, and it's just got some extra features to it. I mean, one of the main things you can notice here is it's got an e-ink display on it that shows you your name and your frequency and some other settings, including your battery fuel gauge. E-ink display is great because even when you pull the batteries out, you can still see the labeling on there, and it's very easily readable in sunlight. And then it is backlit if you're in a dark environment. And in addition to that e-ink display, we've got some status LEDs both on the top panel and on the front of the unit. We talked a little bit about batteries before. Everything that we make will take a lithium-ion rechargeable battery. And so in the case of the A20TX, we're going to take a lithium-ion battery that is the same size as your standard AA. This is called a 14500 size lithium-ion battery. The difference here is it's a higher voltage. So what's nice about this is the batteries run in parallel. So you could even hot swap if you need to, but just makes it, give you excellent reliability. And again, as with all the other transmitters, it's rechargeable in the unit if you want using the USB-C, or there's lots of great external charging options as well. Battery runtime on this is about 10 hours, depending again on your power level, but it can be compatible with other AA size batteries. So you could run alkalines in this in a pinch. Nickel metal hydride is probably a better option if you're going with a different rechargeable than the lithium ion. But it means that you can go find batteries locally if you need to. And you could even run, the Energizer Ultimate Lithiums in this as well if you wanted to run lithium primaries. Top panel on here, the same 3-pin LEMO, but in this case, we're giving you some extra functions with the 3-pin LEMO. We make some accessory adapter cables that will actually go from the 3-pin LEMO to an XLR. In that case, you can use a balanced mic or line level input, and we can also provide phantom power. It's got 12 or 48 volt phantom power available on that output. So you can plug kind of any microphone you want into this body pack transmitter. And it's also got a digital input. And so if you wanted to use this for an AES-3 digital input, a lot of people do this for like a point-to-point link. Or for our location sound folks, there are some Sheps mics that use the AES-42 digital microphone protocol, and we support that as well, which includes the AES-42 version of phantom power to power the microphone. And we've also got a guitar adapter cable available for it. Like we talked about, we can do 48 volt phantom power. The preamp on here is the same preamp as is used in our mixer recorders. And so that's where you get this 140 dB of dynamic range. What we talked about is kind of critical to that gain forward audio quality. I don't know if we've got a picture of this. We could go back a couple, but there's some buttons for local control when you do open the battery door. So you can see there's a red power button on there, and then you've got the 3 soft keys for changing your menu. So you can do programming on the unit. We find most people will use NextLink to keep it in sync with the receiver, but you can program things on the front panel if need be. And then there's an A20 remote app. All of the transmitters will have Bluetooth capability, and Cody's going to give you a demo of the A20 remote app a little bit later. There's an optional switch for the top of this, which is useful for a number of different things. It's a non-contact switch, meaning that there's no wiring that passes through, so the water resistance of the top of the chassis doesn't change when you add the switch onto it. And the switch slides over and then kind of flips down and locks, which is a nice positive mechanical locking, so you can reach down and feel exactly if the switch is on or off. And it's fully programmable, so you can decide, what do I want the switch to do? Do I want it to just audio mute or perhaps RF mute? It could even turn a internal recording on or off. You could adjust some auxiliary routing for like a talkback function if you wanted to. So lots of different options with the switch. And you can also then control it from the web app, which we can show you later. And last but not least, the smart guitar cable. So one of our electrical engineers here is also a guitar player. And so when he had the opportunity to do a bespoke guitar cable for A20TX, he was very excited about it. And so we built in really a full-featured DI box there's a small circuit board in the actual 1/4-inch connector here. So that allows you to set your input impedance, which is sort of, you want to emulate, in most cases, the input impedance of, let's say, your guitar amplifier. And so we've got a 100K ohm, a 1 meg, and a 10 meg ohm setting there. So you can decide how you're going to load your pickups, which can have some impact on your tone. And in talking to some people out in the field, we found that they were actually soldering capacitors into their guitar plugs to also be the same as like a certain length of guitar cable. So we said we can do that. So we've got a switchable capacitance in the end of the guitar plug as well. So you can switch capacitance in that is equivalent to either nothing or all the way up to 60 feet worth of guitar cable. So if you really want to be as close as you can to a wire, we're doing that with the smart guitar cable. And the A20HH, the handheld that just came out earlier this year, or actually end of last year, it's something that we spent a lot of time thinking about, like, what do people want with a handheld mic that you might not have currently? So some of the unique things that we've got with this handheld are the outer shell is all one piece that comes off to show you a metal frame underneath. And then here's a cool exploded view of it. We've got a CD1 capsule. That's what every A20HH is going to ship with. This capsule is a dynamic cardioid capsule. It's a dual diaphragm. We think it sounds really nice, but if you want to use other capsules with it, we are compatible with a very wide variety of other capsules, and we'll talk about that in a sec. There's also a threaded collar underneath, which is kind of a key part to this capsule compatibility. And then and you'll see on the next picture, but here's the different capsules that'll fit on it, because the threaded collar is actually reversible. So one side of the collar has threads that are compatible with Shure capsules and any Shure, compatible capsules. And then the other side would be Sennheiser or Sennheiser compatible. And then there's enough pins in there to make contact with either type of ring contact pattern. So really that covers the majority of the wireless capsules that are on the market. And we've tested this with, at this point, well over 45 different capsules. And it works with all of them, which is great. So if you've got a capsule that you like the sound of it, use it. Like, we want to be your high quality wireless audio link for the capsule of your choice. And because that threaded collar comes off, now there's a control ring underneath it that can also be removable. And so this gives you the ability to swap out various controls from a single push button to a 3 push button, slide switch, or just a window on there that shows some LEDs that can shine through to give you some indication from underneath. Like, there's lots of different control ring options. And there's the LEDs that shine through the control ring. And there's e-ink display, which is the same display as we use on the A20TX with kind of the same user interface. There's a USB-C. As we said, everything's got a USB-C that can be used for charging the battery if you need to. This at the A20TX and the A20HH both have a micro SD slot for internal flash memory, or if you need to use that, they're removable, or the USB-C can be used to pull files off of that SD card. The battery on this is an 18650 size, which is just a little bit larger than your 14500 that we talked about before. That's more of a AA size. So this is going to be 4000 milliamp hours, giving you over 10 hours of runtime. And the A20HH ships with 2 of these batteries. Below that, there's an induction charging coil, and we've said there is an drop-in inductive charger that you'll see soon. So that'll be for your tabletop sort of setup where you want to just have it ready to go on a charger. Non-contact charging is going to be a nice option. And then something we spent a lot of time on here is what folks have affectionately called the rocket antenna. It's sort of a cone-shaped antenna on the bottom. We're trying to solve a couple of issues with this. Number one, obviously we have to cover 470 to 1525, that spectrum band tuning. And so you need an antenna that's efficient at those different frequencies. And then one of the pain points we heard from users was that, when you grip the antenna on your microphone, a lot of times that can reduce the signal. And so we really tried to focus on that, where this antenna in particular, when you put your hand around it, it doesn't detune near as much as some of the other designs that are out there. And so you'll see some reduction in RF signal, but not near what you're used to. And so it makes it so it's a little less of a concern when somebody just grabs the microphone wherever they want. And because there was some space inside of that cone-shaped antenna, we've got a little counterweight that fits down in the bottom. And same thing with that, is we were talking to people who said, the different capsules that I put on my mic, they've got, I'd like to pick on DPA because theirs are pretty heavy. Then other manufacturers make a little bit lighter weight capsules. So maybe you want to adjust the weight and balance of your microphone, and we let you do that with the counterweight in the base. So yeah, as we said, the chassis underneath, it's a die-cast metal chassis that the outer pieces connect to. But because all of those pieces are removable, it also makes it really easy to customize this thing. So you can actually buy the outer shell pieces separately if you want to, and there's a number of customizers that we've partnered with who have those things in stock. And so if you want this thing custom painted, chromed out, blinged out, like we're showing in the picture here, you've got a lot of good options for that. So that kind of covers the basics of the transmitters. Oh, and also very durable. This one's been dropped over 130 times right on the nose of the capsule. And that grill is a little bit worse for the wear, but it still works. And the polycarbonate on the outside there is still looking in pretty good shape for as many times as it hit the concrete. So we're focusing on durability because obviously that's important to people.
Awesome. Yeah. So that's a very cool overview of the receivers and transmitters. You got time for a little bit of questions here, Gary, that came in?
Yeah, sure.
Cool.
Before you get to the actual listed questions, we have a question that came from Lauren White in the chat window.
Okay.
Is there a box that is a replacement for the radial SGI that converts the XLR output of the receiver to 1/4 inch?
Yeah, stay tuned on that. That's something we have heard of. I mean, a lot of people are using a radial reamp box. This would be an application where you have a guitar cable and you've got the balanced analog out from the receiver, and you want to run that through some transformer isolation, which is going to let you plug straight into an unbalanced 1/4 inch, let's say a guitar amplifier or a guitar pedal or something like that. So we've got some stuff in the works there, but for right now, I mean, that radial reamp box is a pretty good way to go.
Do you have flag extenders for the A20HH to allow for logo flags, but still allow for your control collar?
Yeah, we don't currently make flag extenders, but because we are compatible with both the Shure and the Sennheiser threading and pin setup, you should be able to use the flag extenders that you already have in your inventory for that. But if you got a reason that you'd like to buy a Sound Devices flag extender instead, certainly shoot us an email and let us know your wishes there.
Cool. And then will there be other console integrations in the future?
Yeah, I mean, we've definitely heard that request to do more integration with various, third-party systems, and so there's the number of things in the work there. But we're starting with our friends over at Digico.
Very good. All right. That was either everyone's asleep or we did a really good job with only 2 questions. So hopefully it's the latter. So yeah, I think if you're okay with it and everyone wants to, let's dive into some of the interactive portion of this and start kind of building an astral system. Perfect. All right. So with this, I've got a few things, and if anyone on here wants to chime in at any point, wants to see something, I've got a few different views set up, and we'd like to really make this work for you guys that are watching virtually. So please let me know if you want a different view, if you want to look at something, and we'll do our best to kind of make it work. I've got just kind of a setup of a system right here in front of me. So this is a Nexus Go. This is a Nexus, and then we have a Super Nexus right here with an A20 Opto docked to it. And so we can look at some of these front menus, and I do have an outpost on the Nexus and an outpost over here on the Super Nexus. We're going to pair some stuff to these, but I think for the most part, we're going to try to live in the web GUI here. So to control all of our receivers, to control the A20 Nexus or the A20 Super Nexus receiver, you have a web GUI that you can have directly from the receiver. So the receiver will generate an IP address, and then you can simply put it in up here in the web browser of your choice, and you will now have access to the same stuff that you have access to on the front panel of the receiver. So this is really cool because it kind of gives us just a great overview, but basically anything we can access from the receiver, we can also do from the web GUI. Now, there are a couple tiny caveats like, for instance, networking. For obvious reasons, we don't want to change the IP address of the receiver from a web GUI and things of that nature. But for the most part, especially with these icons up top here, you're going to see a lot of very, very good similarities. I'm actually going to pop back to my Super Nexus here, and you're going to notice on this that those same icons follow the same ones that you're going to see in the web GUI. And we did that super intentionally. So you can kind of have a very similar experience regardless of how you decide to work. We've got engineers that have no web GUI at all, and they just have the Super Nexus at eye level and monitor world and do everything directly from the receiver. And we've got plenty of people that use a web GUI and have it in remote locations. But just the big thing about it was we didn't want people to have to kind of learn 2 completely different workflows, right? Where's the menu if I do it here? Where's the menu if I do it here? So that's going to be one of the big fun similarities, and we can talk through where things are. But for now, this is a completely defaulted system. I kind of factory reset this just before the webinar so we could see everything from a very kind of clean view. The only thing I did do, full disclosure in advance, is pair an outpost because I didn't want to have to get up and be able to plug in the Ethernet from behind here and whatnot. But for the most part, everything is completely default. So on this
Cody,
first screen, yeah, go ahead.
do you want me to talk quick about the outpost setup if they need to do that?
Sure. Yeah, let's go ahead.
Yeah. So if you have a brand new outpost, what you're going to do is just connect the USB cable. There's a USB port on both the receiver and on the outpost, and that'll allow you to set up your IP settings. So then when you go out and connect it to your network, it'll just show up with the IP settings that you've pre-assigned to it. And then you can name it in that screen as well. So depending on what you're doing setting it up, you're probably going to PoE power it. The Super Nexus even provides PoE power on one of the network output ports, so you could just have a direct Super Nexus to outpost, wiring it. That's what works best for your workflow. So it's pretty easy to set that up, and then it just shows up here, and you can just pick it as an X and coast on this screen that you're showing.
And currently, as Gary mentioned earlier, our workflow right now is one host at a time. So we can either choose our outpost or our local SMA antennas, which I have on the front of this Super Nexus, but we do have SMAs as we showed on the rear. And so this is where you would make those decisions on this menu. It is worth noting for people, and I'll try to make it as obvious as I can, audibly, but also we have this little banner up here that shows what product I'm working on. So I have a web GUI for a Super Nexus here, as well as a web GUI for a Nexus. And the one thing to note here is with the Super Nexus, or excuse me, with the Nexus, you only have the SMA ports on the back. So obviously you don't have that selector for your local to be the front or the back. So getting back into kind of how we're going to navigate through the system here. So we've just got our home view. You can expand or collapse all 1 through 16 or 24 or 32 channels, depending on how you have the unit set up. And this is just going to show you everything you've got going on at once. Now, if I would like to go in and kind of dictate what I want to do on a singular receiver channel level, I can simply click into channel 1. And now I've kind of got options to deal with that one singular channel. So you can go through in a list view here between all of these, or you have the ability to X out and then just get back to your overall home view. The next thing we're going to do is look at our TX list. And so this is kind of an amazing place to live in the system when you're first setting up the product, because what you're going to do in here is decide what transmitters are going to live within the receiver ecosystem. So what do I want to have NextLink controlling, and what transmitters are being assigned to what receiver channels, and all of that. And I'm going to pair one here in a second. I'm going to finish the navigation portion, but then we're going to kind of look at this window in depth as kind of our first part of the project. The next window that we have here is RF, and this is going to be a fun one that we'll get to right after TX list view, where we're going to go through all of the antenna modes. After that, we have our RTSA window, or real-time spectrum analyzer. It is worth noting that this is an RTSA while it is decoding audio, and we're going to talk about the benefits there. Audio screen is just somewhat of an overview where we're also able to kind of set what outputs and at what levels we want them to output at, as well as where we would set up our opto. And so all that exists within this audio window here. We kind of touched on NextLink for just a second, and this is where we would pair any outposts. Quick setup is a really fun menu because this almost works like you would a scene on a console. So I can actually choose what parameters from a setup I want to store or load, and I could transfer that from receiver to receiver or give it as a file to another engineer or technician or coordinator. So this is a really fun menu to deal with, especially when you're kind of bouncing between hardware. And then system is just kind of our overall preferences. So we'll mess with this and we're going to hop between a lot of these. So I just wanted to make sure it was kind of obvious what each of these were for before we got into it. But this one we'll dive into a lot because I'll mess with some of the confirmation windows and how we want to see things as we're going through. And then later in this webinar, we'll deal with the macro list for our Astrocom that was mentioned earlier in the program. So first things first here, I'm going to bounce to my camera for just 1 sec. And so I'm going to pull out a A20TX transmitter. And this transmitter has not been paired to any of my receivers. So what I'm going to do is just take a USB-C cable, plug it into the transmitter, and then I'm going to plug it into the front port, or the USB-C port of my Super Nexus here. Now, what that's going to do, and I'm going to navigate this back to the web GUI for a second, is when I plug that into the USB-C slot on the front of the unit here, you're then going to see it pop up into my TX list. So when we're in this TX list, this is kind of, again, home base for everything. So once you're paired into the system, you never have to make this pairing again, as long as you want this transmitter to live with this receiver. So I've just unplugged the USB-C from that transmitter, and now this transmitter is a part of that receiver's ecosystem. So on
Cody,
here, I notice, go ahead.
it's worth noting that if you forgot your USB-C cable, you can also pair wirelessly.
Yeah, let's do that real quick. So this is another A20TX, not the same one that we just had. So I'm going to open it up and power it on. And once I've done that, there's a menu inside of the transmitter here. So I'm going to hit the main menu button. And then from there, I'm going to hit the button that says pair. So when I hit pair, This is now in a Bluetooth pairing mode. As you can see, the LEDs flashing. I'm going to search for a transmitter, and we'll notice that it's showing up in this search for transmitter menu. I'm going to pair
Can you go back to
selected.
your Super Nexus or your web view?
Oh, I'm sorry. There we go. So I'm now going to apply the frequency from this transmitter, and I'll show that again real quick, but it showed up within this window here. So it's going to make its pairing over the air. And once that's done, just like with the USB-C cable, that's now a part of this system until I decide that I don't want it a part of the system any longer. So what's cool about that is, as Gary mentioned, if we don't have a USB-C cable or we just like that workflow, we can do that over the air now too. So now that I've X'd out of that, we have the ability to see both of these. So this one's on. This is kind of a fun list because it shows us a lot of metrics at the same time, but let's work left to right here real quick. So the name of the transmitter that I've paired and the frequency in which it has, right? That's our pretty basic information on the left-hand side. Next is RX channel. So which receiver do I want this transmitter to be associated with? So TX1, I'm going to go ahead and have that to receiver channel 1, and TX2, I'm going to go ahead and assign that to number 2. So now these have both been signed to receiver channels 1 and 2. I see I've got battery life. I see I'm connected to Nextlink here. I also have this banner up here that says all TX. So because Nextlink is connected, I can control things as a group if I want to. So inherently, you kind of have this group that always exists within the system and this place that these can live. I'm going to hop back to system real quick. And within this, I can have, so I got to do that actually on the receiver, but there is an all TX group that you can shut off when you're within that window. And when you're within that, you cannot decide to have all of them automatically go to a group, but I like to have that on. Now, you also have the ability to add up to 8 other groups. Okay, so say I've got a bunch of guitar packs, and then I've got a bunch of handhelds that are with my background singers, and I want to control those all as groups. Well, let's say this TX1, I want to go to my guitar group. So I'm going to assign it to group 1, and now I have this group. So let's call this guitar. And then this, let's say this was a part of a bunch of my background singers. And so I want this group to be controlled independently. So now this one's going to be called BGV. Now, what's great about this is I could have a bunch of transmitters assigned to both of these groups. So now if I click into this BGV group, I can power all of those packs off at once, or all on at once, or mute the RF all at once, right? So we've got that ability to kind of group control these. Or if you go below the groups and work on a singular level, I can control just that transmitter on a singular level as well. Now, one other thing you did notice is this said partial below it earlier. That's because I had one transmitter on and one off. If you have any sort of transmitter inconsistencies within that group, that's what that partial flag was just letting you know. It's just one or more transmitters within the group has something different assigned to it. Another really fun workflow that we've kind of done is this handoff feature, which allows us to work in kind of that over-the-air pairing that Gary reminded me of just a little bit ago, where if I go to this group and maybe these 3 BGV singers are working with an artist on my stage at this festival, but they're also singing for an artist that is coming in a little later in the day. Well, what we can do is have these packs on these people and leave them on them. And I could hand off all of these packs wirelessly. So it will take them out of this TX list and disassociate them from this receiver. Then what I could do is I'm now the ladder band coming in. I could then search for transmitters. All of those other transmitters would be in pairing mode automatically because that's what happens when you hit handoff. It unpairs them from the system, but keeps them in pairing mode. They would all show up in here and I could pair them all selected without ever having to touch those packs or get those packs from those artists or people. And so that's really cool in kind of a corporate scenario where you've got a keynote speaker or that's maybe moving between rooms, bands that are moving, performers. There's a lot of really cool stuff there.
Yeah, Cody, we did have a question come in about how do you handle party dial with this system, which is party dial is something that's maybe a little more location sound centric as far as using that terminology. But this is one way you would do that, where you could hand off transmitters between different receivers. And then also you can dynamically assign the different transmitters to specific RF channels, either RX channels, either from the TX list that you're showing here, or you could do that from the individual channel views. Another question that we had came in is that can you use the outpost with a switch? And I think we kind of skipped over that, but obviously the network connections on the back of the unit, you're going to assign them to either like a Dante network or the control network. And yes, the outpost just lives on the control network. So you can build the control network as a standard Ethernet network, however you wish. You could have separate switches for the control network. You can VLAN it off. You can combine it with Dante if that's your preference, but we give you a lot of options on how to build the network. And then the outpost just needs to be on that control network port with whatever receiver you're pairing it with. And if your switch has PoE power, or if you have a PoE power injector, then that also can handle the powering of the outpost. So it's pretty straightforward hanging it on the network. One more question we had was basically about third-party control, OSC, and like as we've said, like right now we're doing the integration with Digico consoles, but we heard a lot of those requests for additional third-party control, and that's definitely something that's on our radar, but nothing to announce about it at this point.
Cool.
And then
And
last
then-
one is, where is the web GUI on the website? Where is it listed? So that's also something maybe we glossed over a little bit. The receiver itself, like in this case, Cody's showing you the Super Nexus. The Super Nexus is serving up this web page via its control network port. So that same control network port that would be talking to an outpost also serves up this web page. And so as you're building that control network for your wireless system, think about, any devices that you want to be able to access this web page are going to need to be on the same control network with that port on the back of the Super Nexus. But it gives you a lot of flexibility. If you were to, let's say, put a wireless access point on that network, now you could potentially pull this web GUI up on a tablet that's operating wirelessly. If you had the ability to, let's say, remote into a network, you could remotely look at these settings or even remotely look at the RTSA. I mean, in a lot of installed situations, being able to see the spectrum analyzer from a remote location can be very helpful. If you're, one example I've given to people is, let's say you're in a house of worship scenario where you've got some volunteer staff that are using your system, but maybe more skilled staff that can remote in and help them troubleshoot if they run into any sort of interference, things that need to get resolved.
I've got a question along the same lines where the web GUI on the website. It isn't on the website. You just log on to the receiver, right? And then you get it, right?
Correct. Yeah, it's served up
Yeah.
by the receiver, so it's a
sucked up
live web GUI.
from the receiver, right?
Yeah, and one thing that we've gotten requests for and that we are, aware of is that it'd be nice to have some sort of an offline editor so that you could set up these, configure your receiver while you're on your way to the gig, and then get there, plug in your laptop, and push settings into the receiver. And so that's something that we're aware of that request as well.
Yeah. And so I just switched over to this live view here. So from our main menu, there's a network tab on the unit here. When you click that, it gives us our control DHCP address. We can obviously make that static if we'd like. But so that IP address that it is served up is exactly what I have typed in up here in my address bar. And so that same IP is what allows me to access the web GUI. Very cool. All right. So now that we've kind of talked about the TX list and kind of the power behind it and really the organization process, but also a lot of your routing and how you're going to use it kind of lives right here. And it's super nice to have access to all of that in one location. So now that we're kind of looking at this, let's move along to another portion of it. So I'm going to power on all of my transmitters from my all group. And so now they'll both turn on. And here we'll notice a few things. I have mutes and I have LEDs that are showing partial. So I'm looking at my TXs right now. And yeah, it's showing me one of them has an audio mute and one of them does not. And we can look at that here. So clicking into this singular one, I show that I have audio mute. And on this one, I do not. So that's why this is showing me partial. And then same with the LEDs. I have the LEDs on this one and I have the LEDs on this one separate. So let's go ahead and match all these just so we're looking at the same thing. So mute's going to be off and LEDs are going to be on. So that command has now been sent to both of these transmitters that I have on the unit, and we're going to start working from there. So next thing I want to do is start talking about my RF portion of this. This kind of goes hand in hand with our RTSA and our scan. So we're going to look at this a couple different ways, but I think in here, I kind of want to start out because when I was doing a lot of freelance events, more than kind of what part of the spectrum we were going to look at, because of how big these shows were getting and kind of how the antenna deployment just had to work with set pieces or who's involved or where the gear's coming from, we kind of had to decide on the antenna deployment almost before anything. And so we've got this really cool feature. And again, I'm in the Super Nexus right now, not the Nexus, where within this, I've got all these different antenna modes that I can look at. So I've got diversity, four versity plus a pair, hexversity, several different combiner options. We've got all of these. And what's really cool is these are all accessible on the fly. So if I want this to be a diversity rig, I can just have it be a diversity, which is in a single antenna pair. Four versity, which is using four antennas, hexversity, six antennas. So you've always got this grid on the side that's going to show you antenna pairs. So this is my first set of antennas, A and B, second set A, B, and third set A, B. And then this kind of grid shows me what these antennas are doing. So right now I've got six antennas in hexversity accessing 512 to 536 megahertz. If I drop this down, this also correlates, this list correlates to all the frequency coordination programs out there where we have the models that are built. You're going to see a Sound Devices model that's going to be followed by a country. So it'll say Sound Devices US, and then it will have each one of these filter ranges. And so what's cool is you can then select these ranges. So let's talk about maybe duplex gap. It's going to let me know that we are changing the radio on this system. And now I'm operating these six antennas into duplex gap. Now you'll notice there's two other bands right here and they're grayed out and I don't have any antenna information going to those. So if I wanted to access multiple tuning bands, I would look at an antenna mode that would support those bands. Now, if I click each one of these do not commit this antenna mode to the system until I hit apply. So I can actually look at what is going to happen with the system before I've actually decided to use it. So diversity, as we notice, okay, I need three separate tuning bands. So I'm going to use a mode that supports multiple tuning bands, which is in this case, diversity for right now. So let's choose diversity. We're going to apply it. Now I've got a pair of antennas that as long as that pair of antennas has access to the range I select, meaning if I've got an antenna pair that only is capable of 470 to 700, these all need to fall within that antenna range. So my infrastructure has to support what I select. Now, if you've got monarchs, you're able to go 470 to 1525. So let's pretend we've got a pair of monarchs on here, and I want to use some mics in 470 to 494. I want to put some mics in duplex gap, and I'm going to take some mics and apply them to STL. So now that I've got this going on here, because maybe this is how the coordination fell, or these are just the spaces I found, now I can decide to go forward with my deployment. And we're going to talk about the RTSA and how a lot of this stuff works now. So now what we're doing is looking at an RTSA screen. First things first, when we get to a venue, one of the first things we all should do, and hopefully do, is look at a scan of our environment. Regardless of if we've seen a scan from a prior setup or someone that's uploaded something to a database, we want to make sure that that information is still correct. So what we can do here within our system is hit this scan button. And this will now tell me that it's going to stop audio because I am going to take a scan of the entire system. And what's cool is natively, this is going to give me 470 to 616. Sorry, 470 to 616 that I'm going to see right here. So we're just kind of starting in the core UHF area. And it's fun because I get this full wideband scan. And so now what I can do is look at what area that I need to live in or want to live in. So let's say that this portion of the spectrum looks best to me right now. Okay, so I want to live in this 560 to 580 range. Well, if I hover up here, this is going to show me what filter ranges that I have in the Super Nexus support that range. So I'll click this, and it's going to say I've got 2 filter ranges that support that portion, and I want 564 to 588. I'm going to click that. Which band do I want it to apply to? So now I'm in here. Okay. This is like the complex way where you can really dive in on a per antenna kind of scenario. Now, if I want to do this the super easy way, we can have the system do the work for us. Okay. So let's say I just want to roll in and have the system make a decision for me. Okay. I open it up. I've got an area of the spectrum that I'm already in. I can hit auto assign and tell it to just assign my 2 transmitters that I have here in my room right now, assign them. Oh, excuse me. And then from here, it's just going to go ahead and decide where it wants those 2 to go. And it's going to automatically assign those transmitters, those frequencies, and turn them on for me. And I didn't have to do anything with the system. I don't have to have access to these transmitters like in my hands physically. These could be on my A2 table. I could decide however many transmitters that I have assigned to the system I want this to happen with, and it can be that flawless. So you turn on your rig at load in, you open up this screen, you hit auto assign, and as long as those transmitters are in this TX list, it is going to go ahead and find space for them, assign those frequencies to those receivers in real time, deploy it, and turn them on for you. Now, I'm in the middle of my show. We've got these 2 carriers working, and all of a sudden I have some sort of issue here where I see another carrier pop up and I'm just getting interference. Because I have this RTSA, I can make a great decision on where I want to take this mic and put it because I have real-time information on what is clean and what is not. So I wouldn't want to move it over to this area. I can move it over into somewhere clean. In conjunction with having NextLink, I can take this transmitter and move it in real time, and it will fix that problem for me while it's on stage. And I know I've made a good decision. So we've got all these options to be able to do whatever we need to do in real time while we're looking at an RTSA. So these transmitters are decoding audio and working while we're looking at this screen. Another huge powerhouse of the screen is the fact that I can use this as a diagnostics tool. So within this, you'll notice that I'm looking at antenna pair all, right? My system currently, and I'm switching over right now to this RF page just to show everybody, I'm in hexversity, which means I'm using 3 pairs of antennas. So right now on the screen, I'm viewing 3 pairs of antennas in my RTSA. Well, if maybe I just want to view 1 pair of antennas because I think I'm having an issue with that antenna or I'm not getting something over there, I can look at this point and go, oh, high impedance air gap. I actually didn't have that one plugged in. So antenna pair 2, antenna pair 3, and I'm looking at a combination of antennas A and B as a singular line. I can look at A as well as B. I could look at just A or just B. So this is a diagnostic tool for load in and kind of making sure that we have all of our checks and balances is really amazing. And to have access to this right out of the gate is really fun. And then if we are in a situation where someone needs this information from us, from like a CSV file, I can actually export this trace and it's going to go ahead and give me all of that information as well.
Quick question. As you're dragging your frequencies around live during the show, it is recalculating intermod for that new location and positioning it, correct?
Correct. Yeah, it's doing all of the everything that you need it to be doing internally. Yep. So that's the magic of this auto assign. So as we're kind of looking in this menu, we've got the ability to swap this range as well. Okay, so now if I decide that this is not the area I want to live, I don't have to go back to that RF tab up here. I can do that direct from the RTSA as well. So now I'm on my RTSA view and I'm swapping bands, and I also want to swap antenna modes. So this is, again, what I love about it. Say we've moved gigs, we're at a completely different facility, and now I want to do 4 versity plus a pair. So now this means I'm going to have 4 antennas covering my main stage in duplex gap, and I'm going to have 1 pair of antennas maybe covering a B stage for an opening band, or maybe it's just on the same stage, but I do want my opening band to be using this receiver. So I could put them in a completely different area. Okay, so now what we're looking at is 4 antennas covering duplex gap, 2 antennas covering STL. Go over into my RTSA, and now what we're going to be able to do is look at a bunch of different stuff here at the same time. Now, one thing I want to make note of is when we are in the Nexus, not the Super Nexus, so I've just I just went from one receiver to another. We'll notice the one thing that's really different here is I only have this singular tuning band. Okay, so instead of having up to 3, we are only going to be working in one singular 24 meg tuning band. So I'm going to go ahead and put this one in duplex gap, and now we have access to that right here. All the same things are going to apply in Nexus that we always have access to. So the antenna diagnostics, the auto assign, the scan function, all of that exists within here. Gary, do you think I'm missing anything as far as what we're looking at in RF or RTSA before we kind of move on to the audio portion of this?
Well, you've got one question about what metro area in the US are you showing us the spectrum of?
Ah, nice. Yeah, I'm in Nashville, Tennessee.
I have another question along the same lines there. With Soundbase Pro, will Soundbase Pro control your RF directly the way it controls other receivers?
Yeah, so what
It's
we've
the
said so far,
offline Pro.
yeah, what we've said about Astralcom is that at the moment it's Digico consoles, but yes, we're aware of the other third-party integrations that people are asking for. Soundbase Pro is definitely on that list, as is something like an OSC or maybe like a QSys module or those sorts of things. I mean, we know people want to
So
have
not
those
at
other
the moment.
integrations. Right now, no, but it's definitely on our radar.
But I know that all of your products and your bands show up in Soundbase Pro.
Yeah, we've worked with Soundbase and really every other frequency coordination software that we can to make sure that from a coordination standpoint, you're able to go in and select Sound Devices Wireless and coordinate it. But I think what you're talking about with Soundbase Pro is to be able to push frequencies from the Soundbase software into the receiver, and that
Now,
not right now.
Your spectrum analyzer you've been showing here is built into the receiver, right?
Correct.
Yeah, it's a real-time spectrum analyzer that is part
And
of the receiver.
how much of that spectrum analyzer can you use and not stop the audio?
The nice thing about this system is that we're, in the case of a Nexus, we're capturing 24 meg of RF, and that's what we would call like the real-time bandwidth of the receiver. And so you were able to decode up to 16 channels of audio with a Nexus and show you the real-time spectrum analyzer for that 24 meg. And then with the Super Nexus, it's that times 3, right? So we have up to 3 different tuning bands, and each one of those tuning bands is freely assignable to any of the 32 channels of receive. And additionally, you can see an RTSA for each one of the tuning bands. So it's not like the RTSA removes the ability for one of your receivers to decode audio. It all can happen simultaneously.
But if you're doing a full scan,
if you're doing a full scan, it takes the system out of receive audio mode, because then what it's really doing is it's stepping through each of the different filter ranges and sort of stitching that together into an overall scan view. So that's the sort of thing in general that would be your workflow at the beginning of the day when you're trying to find your clean, quiet spectrum. And then once you see that, now you can go and apply your, set your tuning bands up. And then once you've set your tuning bands, now you get real-time spectrum analyzer for each one of your tuning bands where you're placing microphones.
And on a slightly different subject, the RF cascade ports, are they filtered at all?
They are not on the Nexus. So with the Nexus, it's a passive split. And so you're going to have like, 3.5 dB worth of loss through it because it's a passive 2-to-1 splitter. They are filtered on the Super Nexus. So what that means is if you're going to, hook up probably, 2 or 3, if you have 3 Super Nexus, you could have 96 channels. So that's maybe one of your larger deployments, right? But you want to make sure that the first Super Nexus in the chain has the highest and lowest tuning band of interest in use. That way it makes sure to pass those signals through to the subsequent Super Nexus.
Yeah. Oh, you muted, Pete.
So they are filtered. They are filtered.
The cascade output on the Super Nexus has a wide filter on it, and so it encompasses the full tuning range of that first Super Nexus. So you just have to make sure that Super Nexus has your highest and lowest tuning bands that you care about, so that your cascade output on the Super Nexus then has the proper RF signal for the things downstream. There's a question about how you showed syncing a TX to a Super Nexus. Does the requirement of needing to use location services on a smartphone, has that been removed? No, you still need to use location services on your smartphone to set the country. And I guess maybe this is a good time for Cody do you want to do your like initial setup demo
Yeah.
of what you would do? Like you can change most of the settings on the system locally or with the web GUI, but there are a few things that you do have to use what we call A20 remote app. It's an app that's available for iOS or Android, and it does require location services. For your very first setup, you need to have an internet connection because it's going to authenticate the transmitter. That's only for your very first setup. So like if you pull a brand new transmitter out of the box, make sure that the first thing you do is connect it to A20 remote on an iOS or Android device that can see the internet. After that, it doesn't ever need to see the internet again. But then if you ever need to change the country, once you've done that initial country setting, you would also need to use A20 remote because that's how we authenticate. Location services uses things like cell towers, GPS, and Wi-Fi to confirm your location. And so that's just to satisfy regulatory requirements so you can set the different countries, because this really is for us worldwide hardware where it's the same transmitter and receiver hardware no matter where you go, which is obviously a big benefit for folks doing tours and that sort of thing. If you're traveling throughout Europe, you can just set it to different countries rather than having to maybe hire gear locally for different countries or carry 2 or 3 different band splits worth of equipment.
Yeah, and I'll show, remind me when we get out of the A20 remote demo, I'll show on the Super Nexus being able to change the country on the front menu of the Super Nexus as well.
Okay.
So yeah, what I'm going to do here is share my phone screen.
I'll answer a couple of questions while you're getting that set up. What frequency is used to control communication between the transmitter and receiver? So NextLink does operate within 2.4 gig spectrum, so 2400 to 2483. It is not Wi-Fi or Bluetooth. It's something that we wrote ourselves in-house, basically because we wanted it to operate well on a congested spectrum, because we know 2.4 gig can be congested. So it's a very narrow band frequency hopping system. In all of our testing, it's got exceptionally long range. I mean, generally speaking, the range on NextLink is longer than the range that you would have on your audio link for that. And obviously the reason to use 2.4 gig is because it allows us to do Bluetooth and NextLink with common antennas. So then common radios inside the unit. So it simplifies things and gives you better battery life if you do that. And then
All right.
can you use when you use Smart Scan, can the system recommend the best band and frequencies? So Cody showed you the auto assign function. And right now, auto assign assumes that you've picked the frequency range that you want to use, the tuning band that you want to use. But that's a good suggestion. Like we could make the scan function smarter to where it could suggest within this scan range, I think these are some tuning bands that you want to take a look at because they seem like good, clean, quiet spectrum.
Right.
There's a
Wanna-
question about RF transmitters and receivers around video walls, which tend to suck RF for some reason. I like that question. Yeah, so I think and we'll probably show a slide about this a little bit later, but the filtering, I mean, the reason for doing these 24 meg tuning bands is because that allows you to apply very steep filtering to it. And we use something called SAW filter, surface acoustic wave filter, that it's got a very steep roll off. And so it allows you to eliminate out of band interference, like, digital television or cell phones or two-way radios, but also if you know there's a particular area where a video wall system is putting out RF noise, you can then tune away from that, and the filters do a very good job of eliminating those interfering signals. And the last question here is, so you cannot pre-program a system country code before you send it to the remote country. And that is correct. And that's for regulatory reasons. Like, you're not able to, for example, if I was in the United States, I couldn't set my system to Germany before I shipped it over to Germany.
All right. So, kind of getting to that regulatory location services conversation, when you first get a receiver or transmitter, it is really good and required in a lot of cases to actually verify it in the country you're in for those exact reasons. So that way you get, and it's kind of funny because we hear some people thinking that this, isn't a benefit, but really it's the coolest thing because it gives you the most access to spectrum in whatever country you're in, rather than just being stuck in whatever default country that could have been sent, right? So the first thing you do is you go on the App Store and you'll notice this little icon that I have on my screen here, the A20 Remote app. We're going to click into it, and of course it's new, so we're going to see nothing in it. I am actually powering up right now an A20 mini transmitter, and I'll show it on the screen when we're done here. But so I'm simply just holding in the power button, and I'm holding it in until the blue light on the back starts flashing, which indicates pairing mode. And then once I've done that, what's going to happen is when it's in pairing mode, oh, sorry, I just double clicked it, my fault. Okay, so now it's in pairing mode, it's actually going to show up in our list here. And when it shows up in the list, the one thing that we need to do is select it, and then we have to be able to pair it to my device. And when it's paired with my device, we're going to have the ability to actually verify that country. So on this manage devices screen right here, I've labeled and named this mini Nexus Double DBL1. And so initially I'm going to pair this with the system, and we're going to go ahead because we all accept the terms and conditions. And now it's been paired with my phone. So now this transmitter is verified. So now that we have that ability, it can transmit in that country. So I can simply just click on the name and it's going to connect to it. So not only do we have the ability to transmit legally within that country, but we also can control this transmitter as well from the device. And what's cool with that is when you've got that ability, it's within Bluetooth range. So it's actually going to work, with Nextlink a lot further than if you would, but with you're in, close enough distance, you have some access to be able to just control these transmitters as well. You can't see, Gary, tell me if you can see the rack gear as well while I'm sharing.
It just shows up in your as your video.
Okay.
So
Well, I'll show it again in a
Kelly would have
second.
to spotlight it for us. But yeah.
No, it's all right because I'd rather show the app here. But in the app, I'm also going to put my Super Nexus right now into pairing mode as well. And what's going to happen there is, and now it shows up in the app, and this is where you're going to verify the actual country that you want to operate in. So what Gary was saying was like, if I want to operate this in Germany, I would have to physically go to Germany. And then what I would do is put the country code, set it to Germany, and now it will verify that receiver. once that
Yeah, Cody,
receiver's set,
why don't you go to your main screen from here then, just to show them where that is. When you say,
okay,
setting the country, you actually do it from the A20 remote app.
yeah,
So go to your home screen on the A20 remote app. And then click on your Super Nexus. And so from in here, there's a button that just says synchronize date, time, and country. And so that's what's going to push the authenticated country information to the Super Nexus. And the thing that allows you to do now is synchronize the country between the Super Nexus and any of its connected transmitters.
Mhm. All right. So, yeah, so I'm gonna, I think, stop sharing on this part. And let's go back. So yeah, on this mini, all I did was, again, underneath the door here, there is just a singular power button that we have, and that's what I held in just to get it into pairing mode. So that's how we got it into the system. And then I'm gonna flip over here to the Super Nexus. And within this part of the unit, on the main screen, I had just my icons up here. I'm gonna hit System, and then this button right here, and I don't know how well it can be visible, but it's green right now, and that means that it was verified through the app. So if I were to click this, now it's going to give me our list of supported countries, and I could just scroll through, and today we're going to be in Indonesia. So we would select that. It would tell us that we would need to restart the unit to actually apply that setting. We would reset it. It would then give us access to that spectrum within the receiver. But the transmitters cannot transmit until they've been verified. So once you verify the receiver with Nextlink, or I'm sorry, with the A20 remote app, it will then push that information to your transmitter. So you don't have to do that one by one anymore on the actual transmitter side.
Yeah, I think that the point here is you can set the country using the A20 remote app directly with the transmitters, but especially if you have a lot of transmitters, the simpler workflow would be to use the A20 remote app to authenticate the country on the receiver, and then the receiver can push the country data out to the transmitters. And that's the difference between the country being listed on the receiver in green, which means it's authenticated from the app, versus gray, which means it's been manually selected. It's valid to manually select it, but if you do that, it can't push the country data out to the transmitters.
Yep. Cool. So no questions there. Great. All right. So yeah, now that we're kind of moving back into the system, I'd like to touch just a bit on the audio side here. So within this standard audio meters, we have a tone generator within here where you can route tone to wherever output you decide you want it to, or all or none. The frequency in which you want it to route tone at, and then the level. But we also have another option here, which I actually find really cool because depending on the show you're on or the engineer you're working with, we kind of all have different ways that we like to set the gain structure throughout the system. And sometimes you get to a show and an engineer wants all the transmitters at this level. Well, because we don't really have the transmitter gain structure because of gain forward, we can actually send the output of the unit or the audio output individually or globally at a certain level. So if I want all my outputs to just leave the unit at +10, I've got that ability and just can do that from one button rather than having to go into every single channel and set each channel output to +10 or whatever the engineer so chooses. Another really big benefit.
It's important to note here that there are still individual channel gains. And
Yeah.
so if you do have, a mixture of various like handheld or lab mic, or whatever, you can adjust those channel gains. But then if you've got, let's say, a mixing console that you're using the digital trims and the digital trims don't have a huge operating range, you can just say, all right, I'm going to give you an extra 20 dB on everything. And that's what the global setting helps you to do quickly.
Yeah. And real quick, just because it was kind of applied to the remote app. Jason Glass just asked a question. What are frequency authorizations, and is this how we might utilize STAs or AppTrack?
I love that question.
It's an awesome question.
So yeah, great question, Jason. So yes, we've got a system in here that we call frequency authorizations, and you saw that as Cody was demoing the app. AppTrack, for folks that haven't used that before in the United States, is 1435 to 1525. And that's one of those areas that you have to get a license from the FCC to operate there. And these licenses are site specific. And so because it's a more involved coordination process, we don't allow that by default. So I think it's probably worth saying, like, for some of the ranges, and this is true for most countries, some of these frequency ranges might require a license. Like in the United States, a Part 74 license from the FCC is required for a variety of ranges. STL band 940 to 960-ish is a good example of that. But then AppTrack band is, again, more restrictive. So the way that we deal with AppTrack band and other similar frequency ranges is you send us a license that you got from the FCC, and then we can send you back a frequency authorization, which you can open up in the A20 remote app, and then it syncs to the transmitters and receivers in a similar way that you were syncing those country changes. And so now it'll take, in this case, let's say 1435 to 1525, and it will unlock those frequency ranges at whatever power level your license is good for. Also within whatever location that your license is good for as far as latitude and longitude. So you have to authenticate your location to use that frequency authorization. So yeah, it makes it very powerful. Like, you can really, anything that you can get a license for, if our hardware is capable of tuning there, we can issue you an unlock code once we see your license.
Yeah, which has been just such an amazing thing, because the events that I know a lot of folks in this room are used to operating in, right? Finding equipment that can operate in that area, or even finding, the ability to get that license is hard enough. Nonetheless, obtaining the equipment and the user that has the appropriate licensing. So we've kind of really streamlined that process into, again, that same singular box. All right, so back on the audio output side of things. So if we remember to kind of when we were talking about the back panel of the Nexus, the Super Nexus, or even the Nexus Go, we've got the ability to kind of flex each one of these outputs, which I really love this part of it, because again, we might want the 1 through 8, which are maybe my guitar channels, to come out a different audio level than my handhelds or whatever else I'm using, right? So we can set audio out 1 through 8 to be guitar level, and then maybe 9 through 16, let's go ahead and set that to be line level. And so now we've got,
Cody, in our world, just to be specific, guitar level really just means unity gain. Like, whatever level you're seeing coming in from the guitar at that guitar adapter on the other side of the A20TX is the level that you're going to send out the analog output on the back of the receiver.
yeah, awesome. Thank you for clarifying that. I always forget to make that note. So yeah, we just try to really allow for different workflows on each one of these. But then another really big benefit is, say this is only 16 channels that we have loaded into the Super Nexus, because natively it is 16 channels, but I still have output ports for up to 32. Well, if I want to utilize those again, I can go ahead and route my audio of 1 through 8 as line level, and then I can go ahead and take my 9 through 16 as that guitar level. And now I've, again, built in a passive split kind of right into this unit. Same with the AES, right? I can route my audio routing multiple times depending on which ports I'm using. So we really wanted to make sure that flexibility was understood, because even though it's set as a base unit at 16, you still have a lot of capabilities for what you're doing with those other ports. And, as Sound Devices mantra, nothing goes unused here. So we really wanted everyone to have access to that. Sync reference for the unit, as well as our MADI formats, because remember, we did have the MADI on the Super Nexus as well as MADI on the A20 Opto. And then if we notice this bottom button here on this audio screen, our Opto setup, so predominantly here, you're just kind of setting the routing options for your A20 Opto. So our ID, the octa-core speed, if we want that sync, that MADI, the SR seed for the MADI source, and then your octa-core outputs. We can select all up here, and then basically just commands for our GPIO, right? How we are going to trigger it, what is the condition in which it happens, and then what happens from that channel, right? So this is just all you really get in here, and it's all you really need for being able to set that up is a very easy kind of workflow.
Cody, one quick note on the, if you go back to that screen, the MADI 3 and 4 sync reference, like a reason you'd commonly want to have that MADI 3 and 4 output, or at least as we were talking to folks, we know a lot of people run their octa-core networks at 96K, but the MADI, maybe you've got a feed to a broadcast truck where they want to run it at 48K. So by default, it says follow, which says follow the, your other master clock selection. But if you're using that word clock in to, let's say you're sending truck clock in to do 48K, you'd want to select that here to word clock in, or you could fix it at 48 or 96K.
Cool. And so that really kind of covers our overall audio output window. In NextLink, we really covered the majority of this, right? So we paired our Opto or our Outpost at the beginning of the session here. Gary talked about how to do that, and then we talked through, again, which is our host and what antennas we're deciding to use if local is actually selected. We can change the name of the outpost and the IP here. We covered quick setup and then system. So let's dive into just a little bit of this 1RX view, and then Gary, we can decide where we want to take it from there and kind of our quest.
Sure.
So yeah.
We got one question that came in about channel licensing. So
Okay.
yeah, the way that the licenses work on this system is they're tied to a serial number. So when you do the license upgrade, you would license a particular Super Nexus with the additional channels.
And then, yeah, as we mentioned earlier too, are they permanent with the rental option as well?
Mhm.
Yep. Cool. So let's go ahead and still operating in duplex gap. So I'm going to assign a transmitter here, and I'm going to assign a transmitter here. And what we're going to do is now we're looking at these transmitters on our RTSA, but then on my home view, we're going to go in and kind of have a pretty familiar workflow with a lot of the RF ecosystems out there. We've got RSSI meters, we've got a timeline, we've got our Q meter, frequency, and the name of that transmitter on our receiver channel, battery life, as well as NextLink status. So when we click in here, again, kind of what we're getting is just a lot of the metrics for this singular receiver channel with that transmitter. It is worth noting that we have our power ranges here, but if we did for some reason allow extra high RF power to get to that 40, which we don't have that option here because of the area of the spectrum that we're in the United States, doesn't allow for that. But if it did, this extra high power in an area that does allow it would give us that 40. So the 40 on the TX and the 100 on the handheld is done in this menu. So you do got to enable that to have access to that. There's just a few other features in here, but to backtrack to someone's question earlier about the LEDs, this is also where I can take away or have the LED access on these packs for the blackout mode, as they quoted. So do I want LEDs on the top, on the front, on the top, or both of those, all? And then my switch that Gary mentioned when he was going through transmitters, what function do I want that switch to be? Now, what's really cool about this is changeable over the air. So via Nextlink, if that switch needs to have record, start, stop for one part of my set or take or show, and for the other half of it, it needs to be power on off, I can simply send that command from here to change the function of that switch in real time. So that applies to all of these. Anything that we're doing applies to that Nextlink channel to go to our transmitters in real time. One of the other really fun things that we've got with our system is this audio outs. So we've kind of built in like a matrix mixer for full workflow on this point. The reason this kind of started was actually from an artist camp that wanted to be able to have a guitar tuning channel from the same pack, but have it come out of somewhere completely independent. So what's happening here is I've got a switch on my A20 TX pack, and this is SX TX1, so that's this pack. My audio out is coming out of main channel 1. Well, my aux channel can really be routed through anything I want up to 64, right? So this is now a 16 channel unit that I have base model with 32 audio output ports on the back, but then I have up to digital 64 for output routing. So maybe if I have the switch in the up position on output channel 1, so they're playing guitar on stage, but when I flip this switch, I want it to go to a guitar tuning channel that only my guitar tech is routed to, I could send that down output 26. Now, at this point, when I flip that switch, it's going to then, well, I got to actually send the switch there. LED switch is going to be aux routing, and it's sending it over the air. There we go. So now it's routing to 26, and if I turn that off, it's now then going to route to channel 1. So it's following what I'm doing with the switch on the pack here as far as the audio routing of it. And so this can be used. Yeah,
Cody, can you talk about the aux mute's main function in there quickly?
absolutely. Yep. So we actually had this kind of come in a few different flavors, and it was really kind of fun to decide how this workflow was going to work for us. And so aux mute's main, what this is going to do is if this button is enabled, now when I flip that switch, it will only come out of output 26. And if that switch is disengaged, it will only come out of output 1. If this switch is not enabled, so it is off, that is now coming out of 1. And if I engage that switch for aux routing, it will come out of output 1 and 26. And so it was cool because we had a few different scenarios with artist camps and stuff about auto tune or wanting to hit 2 different places at the same time, and they needed to take it from a different medium entirely. And this gave a ton of flexibility with that because we were actually able to take it out a bunch of different ways, and then they could dictate whether or not it actually went to that channel or not. And again, this can be changed on the fly as we're going through. The other button we have on here is aux on and off. And all this does is allow us to test this locally. So I don't need to engage that switch right now on the pack. I can just do it from here to temporarily test that routing, or maybe say the person with the pack forgot to actually route that switch and enable it. I could do it for them. Alternatively, if they left it on and needed it off, I could then turn it off for them as well. So a bunch of different modes with safeguards involved. So that flexibility is a lot of fun to have. What else do we want to talk about in here? So just from top to bottom real quick, and then Gary, I'll see if you want to do anything else. Our gain, just as Gary mentioned earlier, this is our individual output gain of just this channel. Our RF power that we covered. We have a high pass filter in here that you can enable as well. Modulation, we have 3 different modulation modes: standard, long range, and test and measurement for doing test and measurement applications like PA tuning. Polarity, we can flip here. RF mode, since we do have recording built in, we can actually do RF or record. So we can have the ability to record to this pack, or we can transmit from this pack. And then the idea to have privacy, or what a lot of people have referred to as encryption. So that is also available when you're running in long range mode.
Yeah, a couple of notes with this. The test and measurement modulation, yeah, if you're using like smart software or something similar, what it's going to do is it's going to give you flatter phase response across the range. So that's helpful for your test and tune in particular, like if you're trying to align subwoofers or something like that. All right. Yeah, I mean, at this point, I think you've gone through all the basic UI stuff, and we really just want to do some Q&A and see what folks are curious about. If there's anything we haven't covered in enough detail to this point.
Well, I think the key element is that we can forget about all the other manufacturers out there and just use this product. Because it solves all the problems. It covers the entire spectrum. It uses all the right capsules. It does everything but blow your nose. And I'm sure there's an app for that.
I'm sure there's a GPIO way to get you a tissue,
Exactly,
right, Pete?
exactly.
Thanks.
We've seen some pretty awesome stuff with GPIO, so we'll work
Yep.
on it. Yeah.
Well, as long as it can turn on your espresso machine, that's all that's important.
We can do that. We have actually confirmed that one too. So not saying it was me, but someone has.
There we go.
Yeah.
And
Jason Glass is wondering if the privacy feature is in parallel when using redundant super nexus and failover. Yeah, so we'll talk about that real quick. The way that we've implemented the privacy function is with a 4-digit PIN that then generates your encryption key. So as long as you match up the correct PIN number between the different receivers, you can actually have multiple receivers listening to the same transmitter.
But they all have to have matched that key.
Yep, they have to have the same key in them.
wow.
And if you're using redundant receivers, do you have to select which one actually does the frequency scanning, or does it just pick whichever one it wants?
As far as if you're doing a scan function, you'd still run that from the primary unit using
Primary.
the web GUI, because what happens is the secondary unit, when you set it up to be mirroring the primary, there's really no user interface until it takes over, and so it's just sitting there and it's following along.
And how will you know if it turns over? Because you mentioned before, you'll never know.
Right. Well, you shouldn't
do,
know on the
but...
audio side of things. Yeah.
Yeah.
The important thing to know about the mirror mode setup, I think, is that you're going to have them both on the same control network. So they're passing data back and forth on that control network connection. And so then if the secondary sees the primary go away on the network, either because of a network failure or because of a power failure, it says, oh, there's something wrong with the primary unit. I'm going to take over. The audio routing, we kind of leave to the user. With those two, the primary and the secondary, are going to be separate audio outputs. We've seen people use like a direct out box if they want to have an auto switching system for that. Or like Cody mentioned before, you could run the primary and the secondary into your A and B inputs on your console. And then when the secondary takes over, it can send out a signal either via Astral Command or via GPIO that says, hey, I've taken over. And then you can use that signal to tell the console to also switch the audio to the alternate inputs if that's the setup you want to do. Pete's muted again. You're muted, Pete.
Sorry, Pete. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a built-in filter apparently.
Built-in mute function for Pete.
There we go, Pete.
Well, what I also like to say, I'll repeat what I said before, just in case you couldn't read my lips. I love the fact that you have a license feature that comes out as a rental portion, because we have so much other equipment out there where if you want to use your intercom system for more channels, you got to buy the more channels permanently. You can't use them for this week, and this makes a
Right.
whole huge help for people who don't have $1 million sitting around.
Well,
Yeah.
and the thing that we really thought about with that, because mine and Gary's experience, along with a ton of our friends that were doing large shows that needed specific licensing or specific channel counts, or we wanted to make all that stuff as easy as possible while still having all those feature sets involved and
Right.
being accessible. So yeah, I mean, for the folks that just want to upgrade for a show or two or three or whatever, like they've got that ability. Or to Jason's thing earlier with the FA, if you just want to throw that in for one thing, you can, right? So you don't have to kind of plan the hardware accordingly. You can just have the piece of hardware and modify it per gig. And we really like that concept.
And if you've done a show with a full boat and saved it, even if you go to a smaller license along the way, when you go back to it, you can reload that same full boat.
Yep. We got a couple more questions coming in. Let's see. With a handheld, different control switch modules, what options are available, the various buttons on the handheld versus so the body pack has one switch option. It's a slide switch, so it can be used in a momentary operation just by sliding it back and forth, but then it can also latch over to its side. It's kind of like a bayonet lock type of scenario. The handheld doesn't ship with any of the control buttons, but they're all available separately, and all of the handhelds, all the switches work with any handheld mic, so you don't have to buy a specific model to get that switch. You can buy a single push button, a 3 push button, or a slide switch, or the 3 different rings that are available for that handheld. So you can decide what the best type of button or slide switch is for your application. In the mirror situation, if a power problem resolved, is the mirror backup unit switched to the main unit? That's a great question. It's something, and give us your feedback on this and what you think. But in talking to people, what we've had folks say is like, look, if the secondary takes over, I just want to keep running on the secondary because I don't know, maybe my primary is intermittently coming on off and offline. Like I don't want it to be fighting back and forth. I want it to do a fails over once and then it stays on the secondary until I have a chance to go, maybe after the show, resolve the problem, shut everything down, and power it back up in the redundant setup. But if you've got suggestions for other ways that we should be doing it, send it our way. And then can you share experiences with RFOF and having enough dynamic range? Yeah, and this is a good question. Just I think with any digital system, dynamic range is important because these digital systems tend to have a pretty high peak to average RF power range. And so I guess I would just say use high quality RF over fiber systems with wide dynamic range. I can say we have tested it fairly extensively with like the Wizicom MFL. And, as with any RF over fiber system, provided that you set up your RF gain structure properly, it works very well with the MFL. And then additionally, a lot of people out there are using like MAT 244s and MAT 288s, which are matrix switchers that are switching antenna zones in there. So if you have a scenario where you need more than 3 pairs of antenna inputs or more than 6 antennas, you could augment the RF distribution on the front end of a Super Nexus with like an MAT 244 or 288 to add additional zones in there. The way I tend to like to do that is still using a 4-versity or a hexaversity mode. That way, as I'm switching antenna zones, I've always got 2 pairs of antennas that are on, and then I'm switching a second pair or a second and third pair. So I've got robust coverage even as I'm moving between my different RF zones. But
In
that's
multiple antenna situations, does the receiver just take the best digital information from all of them and make one signal?
yeah. So this is
Depends on
kind of
what mode.
yeah. This is the magic of a 4-versity or a hexaversity mode for us. Is that when you see on what Cody was showing you on the web interface, if you see 4 antennas or 6 antennas, that receive channel actually has the data from all of those channels. And so it's able to do like a maximum ratio combine of all of them. It's not technically accurate, but I like to kind of describe it like a voting system because I think it helps give people an idea of what's going on. It's like if I've got 6 antennas and 4 of them say that this is a 1 and 2 of them say that that's a 0, I've got pretty high confidence that that part of my digital bit stream is a 1. And so as you add more antennas in there, you actually increase your confidence in the ones and zeros, you increase really the system's performance. And because they are all independently fed into the receive channel, you don't have to worry about things like you would with a multi-zone system where it's still just diversity pairs. And if you're passively mixing diversity pairs together, that can be a real problem. So there's nothing wrong with an MAT 240, like 244 or 288, but you have to understand that you really want to be in separate RF spaces with each of those antenna pairs, and you really want to carefully manage your overlap zones, because in those areas you can really be causing some destructive interference, where a four-versity or hexversity is the opposite. Like you could pile all 6 antennas from a hexversity system onto a stage, and it's just going to make your coverage better. And so that's why I like the idea of doing your switching upstream from a four-versity or a hexversity input, because that gives you the most robust coverage that you can get.
Yeah. And just, we've got a ton of systems out there too that are actively using fiber and matrixing systems on both products, the Nexus and the Super Nexus, with wonderful success. So I think, to answer Jason's question, we're very happy with how it's working with RF over fiber systems.
Yep. Question about trade shows in the US where you can see this. So we generally will be at NAM at the beginning of the year. That's usually January-ish. And then we'll be at NAB, National Association of Broadcasters. That's in April. Infocom in June. And then in the fall, it's usually NAM or AES, depending on where they are. I know those two are overlapping this year, so we're doing the NAB in New York this fall. Let's see, then MSRP of the body pack. So because there's people from different countries and different parts of the world, our standard applications engineer answer to pricing is talk to your local Sound Devices reseller to find out what your pricing is.
Wow, spoken like a true application engineer. Nice
Senior
job.
RF applications engineer.
Senior. Excuse
That's
me. Yes.
That's my favorite part about being in engineering, is I don't have to talk about pricing with people.
No,
It's a
understood.
gift. It's a gift.
Yeah, so unfortunately, we're not doing AES in Long Beach because it overlaps with the NAB
NAB.
show in New York. So no to that question, unfortunately. What headset am I using? Thanks, Lauren. I've got a Jabra headset. This is a Jabra Flex 65 or something like that. I like this headset a lot.
It's another good one about mirror mode that just popped up there too, Gary.
Okay. Does a system using mirror mode have redundant NextLink control, or does mirror mode fail over to defeat NextLink? Yeah. So one of the things that is actually a little bit more complicated with the mirror mode is managing NextLink. And so what the system will do when the secondary takes over is it will also then hand off all of the transmitters to the secondary unit. So you'll see the secondary unit populate with all of those transmitters via NextLink. It does take a little while for all that to move over, but it's the remote control feature, so it's not as mission critical. So if it takes a minute for everything to move over, that is preferable to losing control entirely, right? Opticore patched stage left. What are the options for Guitar World stage right? So so you're asking, like, if you have a Super Nexus with an opto on it, and that's one side of the stage, and you want to bring guitars from the other side of the stage. Yeah, I guess you could. I mean, potentially you could add a Nexus for the other side of the stage, or you could just run analog over from one side to the other.
But preferably you've had Nexus on the other side of the stage. So
my sales folks would like it if you just bought a Nexus for Guitar World. Yep.
And we can't tell you what the MSRP is on that, depending on your location within the country.
Well, I mean, in the US, MSRP on a Nexus is, I think, 14,000 and change. MSRP on a Super Nexus is something in the neighborhood of 35,000, but most people aren't buying an MSRP, right?
Yeah, I did not mean to. John, there.
Yep.
I know I never pay retail.
No, I usually end up paying twice retail. So there you go. Story of my life. Yeah. Well,
Sound Devices getting into the IEM IFB world. I like that question too. I, I give my friends over at Shure a hard time about their standard answer, but I like it in this case. We're always working on new and innovative products.
man. Well, I'll tell you what, that was a lot of information, very well organized, by the way. That was from start to finish, really a great understanding of the product. Um, Definitely going to say we can see where you're raising the bar in a lot of areas, and in the industry, this is the spectrum is not going to get any easier, and we appreciate anybody who's willing to really embrace those challenges and help us users figure out how to get around.
And
Certainly, everybody has your email addresses, and we always encourage everybody reach out. We know more questions will appear. Of course, this will be available on our YouTube channel shortly, so that people can go back and look up those areas, questions, and everything. But thanks for
yeah,
your time, everybody.
I'm sure there will be more questions because that is a really deep system.
That is
There is a lot going on there. That's
indeed.
Well, and we appreciate that too, because we like to make sure that everyone knows that it can be as easy as you want it to be, and if you need it to be a top level, super complex thing, it can also give you those tools as well. So we appreciate that info and feedback.
Absolutely. Well, I think this is where we'll wind it up. Thank you, Cody. Thank you, Gary, for taking the time, and we always appreciate the look in. And I'm sure we'll be circling back around as people in the market come up with more questions and new opportunities and new features come out. We'll expect you to knock on the door and let us know that you're available to chat. So thank you.
Yeah,
Very
thanks so much
good.
for having us.